Good morning. Welcome everyone to this morning's lecture on South Africa into the next 10 years. My name is Danny Kwa. I am Lee Ka-shing, Professor of Economics here at the Lee Kuan Yew School. I will say a bit more in just a minute to welcome our extremely distinguished speaker to the school. But before we begin formally, this event is being recorded. If everyone could just make sure to put your mobile phones on silent or vibrate, that will greatly help facilitate the discussion that will follow. Now, His Excellency, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, is the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa. There, he chairs, among other things, the National Planning Commission, which charts the strategic trajectory for the Republic. Many of you will already know how Mr. Ramaphosa's personal arc and that of his country have been remarkably intertwined for decades. His Excellency had been central in working with the then governing National Party in the important task of bringing to a peaceful end apartheid, and then collaborating closely with that party all the way through to South Africa's first democratic elections in 1994. When Nelson Mandela, South Africa's inaugural president, was released from prison in 1990, it was Mr. Ramaphosa who introduced Mandela's first public post-release speech to the South African people. Before then, by the tender age of 30, Mr. Ramaphosa had become General Secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers, the largest, most powerful trade union in South Africa. His Excellency today is that South African national leader now charged with mapping his country's arc over the coming decades. Many of you will have already been following the news on his visit to Singapore to strengthen, to deepen, to broaden, to entrench political and economic relations, notably in investment and trade between the two nations. We are fortunate indeed to have His Excellency here with us this morning, that we might get greater understanding on these and other issues surrounding South Africa. Now, the order of operation this morning is that His Excellency has kindly agreed to speak for about 40 minutes, where he will give us his views and his plans for South Africa's trajectory going forwards, and afterwards leave plenty of time for questions. The entire session, though, will have to end promptly at 11:15. If I could invite you now to join me in welcoming His Excellency to the school and inviting him to share with us his ideas on South Africa into the next 10 years. Your Excellency.
Thank you, Professor, for your very kind words of welcome. I extend my greetings to the dignitaries who are here, Deputy Ministers from South Africa, and all those who have traveled the long journey from South Africa to be here. But of course, the local people who have also taken the trouble to be here, I greet you. And I bring you greetings from the people of South Africa. It's a real honor to be amongst you and to have this opportunity in this iconic school to have this opportunity also to give this lecture. We remember when we are here at this school, the person after whose name this school is named, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. He was an outstanding patriot who dedicated his life to improving the well-being of his nation and to bring Singapore to where it is today. And we remember him fondly as a great leader who sacrificed a great deal to bring Singapore to where it is. He was also, amongst many other things, an astute statesman whose passion lay in building a united and a respected nation free from want and ignorance. Thanks to his visionary leadership, Singapore is today a global model for good governance, for efficiency, and economic prosperity. And this stands out as one of the bequests that Singapore has from a great leader like Lee Kuan Yew. We're here in Singapore to learn from your remarkable progress and also share our own experience of development and also share with you the journey that we have traversed over the many years, but also where we are headed to. It is nearly 2 decades since our former President Nelson Mandela was warmly welcomed here in Singapore by the people of Singapore and by the leadership of Singapore. Your late Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew described Nelson Mandela as an inspiration to an entire generation because of his moral stamina, his judgment, his democratic values, and his belief in non-racialism. It is because of visionary nation builders like Lee Kuan Yew and Nelson Mandela, and I was saying to a great professor here that having come from Vietnam, it is interesting that coming from South Africa where we had Nelson Mandela and going to Vietnam where they had Ho Chi Minh, and then coming here where you've had Lee Kuan Yew. These great leaders who were great nation builders have done so much to build their nations. And under Nelson Mandela, our country began crafting a new narrative, a narrative of hope, a story of prosperity and lasting peace. For the benefit of the people of our 2 countries, we must now work together to strengthen our bilateral relations as well as to improve trade. And it is for this reason that the professor here says we're here to expand, to deepen, to entrench, and to extend trade between our 2 countries. As South Africans, we invite this industrious nation to expand its role in South Africa and to help grow our economy and skill our people. And I can say that in the talks that we have heard since we arrived here with your Deputy Prime Minister, with your President, and a number of other leaders from Temasek and GRC and a number of others, we've received nothing less than the promise for working with us and helping South Africa achieve the same level of success that Singapore has achieved. Singapore is well positioned to also take advantage of rewarding investment opportunities offered by our country as we reignite economic growth in South Africa to defeat poverty, unemployment, and reduce inequality and underdevelopment. South Africa is a country that is hard at work building an inclusive society from a divided and an unequal past. To achieve sustainable shared prosperity, we are implementing our blueprint plan, which we call the National Development Plan, that has presented a compelling and ambitious vision of what our country should look like by 2030. It is a social compact that unites all South Africans in reducing poverty and inequality through investment, employment creation, economic growth, and skills development. By 2030, we envision a reconstructed society from the ashes of apartheid, where everybody is empowered to embrace their full potential, where we trade more, and where citizens work to create plenty. Our Constitution, which is lauded as the best constitution in the world, and Professor, it is lauded as the best constitution in the world because in crafting our Constitution, we took time to learn from more than 200 constitutions around the world. And we took, stole, and borrowed from each constitution that we could find and took the best out of all these constitutions to create the South African Constitution. And it is for this reason that scholars from all over the world often visit our country to find out how we crafted this modern constitution. And we say thanks to the world for having contributed not only to bring an end to an evil system like apartheid, but also for having contributed to help us create a future which is deeply enshrined in our Constitution. So we borrowed well, we stole well, and we begged well. This Constitution enjoins us to free the potential of each person in our country and to improve the quality of life of all our citizens. Given our long history of racial division and social exclusion, we see a developmental state as a critical instrument to achieve socio-economic transformation for the benefit of all those who live in South Africa. And this Constitution is pivoted around a document that was crafted by our forebears in 1955 called the Freedom Charter, where as they had to confront a divided society and a brutal government, declared that the South Africa that they wanted to live in was a South Africa which belonged to all the people of South Africa. And they said that they would work side by side throughout their lives to create this united South Africa which belongs to all. And today we have this South Africa which belongs to all, as clearly articulated in our Constitution. We recognize that more effective state provision of education, health, municipal services for the people of our country, things like public transport and social security is needed to improve the living standards of the poor people in our country. We are constantly improving the ability of the state to deliver what we call quality services to all our people. We've made significant advances in institutionalizing the process of planning, monitoring, and evaluating the functions of all the spheres of government so that we can see and monitor and follow up precisely what every sphere of government is seeking to do. And we are drawing on best practice to improve the interface between government and communities in advancing social development in our country. In this, we have identified the leading role for our various institutions, particularly in the area of institutions that can generate and contribute to the growth of our country, particularly state-owned enterprises. We're working to transform these and to strengthen them. There is much we can learn from the architecture and the efficient management of Singapore's own state-owned enterprises. And it is for this reason that yesterday we spent quite a bit of time with Temasek to learn how Singapore has been able to harness the strength and the energy and the efficiency of its own state-owned enterprises for the common good. And I can tell you that we go back home having learned a lot of lessons from what Singapore has been able to achieve. We hope to understand how you have developed these companies to be at the forefront of economic development and inclusive growth. South Africa is, as we all know, an integral part of Africa, which is seeing significant and economic growth and social development across a number of fronts. The continent has several strategic advantages, including its youthful population, whilst the rest of the world is beset by an aging population. Africa has a youthful population, and that is a great strength. But its other advantages include the abundant mineral resources, significant agricultural potential, expanding cities, where many Africans are now moving to cities and living there, and a growing middle class. Africa is an enormous market of 1 billion people plus. A number of its countries are in the top fastest growing economies in the world. The African continent is widely acknowledged as the next growth frontier, and many people, and including investors, have awoken to this reality that Africa is the next best thing that they should now go after. However, to achieve its full potential, African countries need to address the legacy of colonialism as well as underdevelopment. In truth, the continent needs to diversify its economies, improve its transport networks and energy supply, educate its youth, and increase its intra-African trade. Through the African Union, the continent has chosen the path of industrialization, driven by regional integration, driven by infrastructural development, focusing on mineral beneficiation, and developing the agricultural value chain. South Africa, in all this, occupies a strategic position on the African continent, which in many ways is an advantage for international companies that establish a presence in our country. And we often say that South Africa is the gateway into Africa, from its geographical positioning and also from the great success that it has achieved to be the largest economy on the continent, and also a country that has good infrastructure. We are also a leading investor as a country on the continent itself. Our trade policy prioritizes regional development through the South African Development Community, the tripartite free trade area, and the continental free trade area as well. And together with Singapore, we believe that we can explore commercial opportunities which will benefit our countries and more broadly the people of the continent. And in addition to its proximity to Africa's fast-growing markets, South Africa is an attractive place to do business. The country has extensive mineral resources and a modern, productive agricultural sector. We have quite a sophisticated financial and business services sector. We have high-quality universities and near universal schooling. Several of our companies have a global presence. We are a stable country with a vibrant democracy, and sometimes our democracy gets a bit noisy and boisterous, but it is still a democracy nonetheless. The noise and the boisterousness is obviously dampened by our very, very strong constitution, which regulates our democratic practice all round. Since 1994, we've had regular, free and fair elections. We just had an election a few weeks ago, local government elections where we had to elect more than 6,000 representatives for our local government. And that too went extremely well. And I'm able to say that much as the ruling party which I belong to did not do as well as it had hoped to, but that was the democratic will of the people, which even the ruling party accepted. Which means that democracy has entrenched itself in South African soil, but also in the hearts and the minds of all South Africans. 21 years later, after achieving our democratic breakthrough, we can testify to the fact that democracy has found a true and an enduring home in South Africa. Transparency and accountability is supported by independent institutions. Our constitution, as I said, is paramount, and the rule of law is widespread and respected. We have put in place mechanisms that bring government, labor, business, and the community constituencies together to seek consensus on major economic and social policies. And this is one of our greatest achievements, an achievement which came about because of the DNA that we've been able to master as a nation. We arrived where we are today through this collaboration between business, labor, government, and communities. And it is through this that we were able to craft a settlement that has ensured that we have this democracy that we are enjoying today. This continues. Whatever problems we have as a nation, we've been able to find solutions through this consensus-seeking process and method. And I always say that these are the shock absorbers, akin to shock absorbers that you have in a car. They are able to absorb the shocks that are given rise by everything that can happen in any country. And in our country, the consensus building mechanisms that we've put in place are good and they are enduring. We continue to improve our global competitiveness in a number of critical areas. The 2016 World Economic Forum's Global Competitive Index ranks South Africa number 47 out of 138 countries, up from 2 places from the previous year. Now, in our mind, in our view, this is a significant achievement for a baby country that's just 21 years old, a country that has just achieved democracy. We now find ourselves in the club of those countries that have had long years of democracy and rule. We have demonstrated sustained improvements in areas like goods and market efficiency. We are 10 positions up from last year in labor market efficiency. Our macroeconomic environment went up 6 positions. We have improved areas like innovation, technological readiness, infrastructure development, and the delivery of health and education. When it comes to infrastructure, we have been involved in the biggest infrastructure development ever seen on the African continent, both on the social infrastructure side as well as on the capital economic infrastructure side. Through social infrastructure, improving the lives of our people, and we were enthralled just yesterday when we heard what your housing board has done in terms of housing Singaporeans. We drew a lot of lessons from that, and on our part, on the social development side, our country has delivered 4 million houses to many South Africans who hitherto did not have houses at all, largely because of the previous system that we had. And our government is determined that right up to 2030, which is the time frame of our developmental plan, we will continue to deliver housing and other social services to our people. And as South Africa works to grow its economy and create employment for millions of young people, a critical area of focus clearly has to be education and skills development. And this is an area where almost 5% of our GDP is focused on. Our past, our very sad past, was the oppression and the holding back of South Africans by the previous misrulers of our country. And it was around education that they found the most effective tool to hold not only the oppressed black majority back, but the whole country back. And it is in this area that the government is focusing most of its attention to show up the skills development of our people, to make sure that they are able to play their rightful role in economic development. One of the most devastating legacies, as I was saying, is a substantial skills deficit, and that constrains rapid development, economic development. Like Singapore, we see the development of the capabilities of our people as the single most investment that we can make in our future. We have massively expanded access to basic and higher education for the poor. The challenge we now face is to match our achievement in improving access with the outcomes of our education system. We are paying specific attention to the extent to which our education and skills development programs prepare our young people for the requirements of the modern industrial economy. Since the global financial crisis of 2008, South Africa has not achieved the sustained levels of growth it recorded following the advent of democracy. Like many countries around the world, we are facing a massive challenge of youth unemployment. We have therefore embarked on a process of accelerated industrialization to increase investment in the economy and increase jobs. We are therefore pursuing a number of strategies that develop industries through which we add value to our substantial mineral wealth. We want to export finished products, not just raw materials. Our economy was configured on a mineral extraction type of process where all we ever did was to extract rock and dust and export it. We now want to turn that around, extract rock and dust, process that, and export finished products. We have an industrial policy action plan that provides incentives and other support to support industries that have the greatest potential for growth. The establishment of several industrial zones in key ports has increased investment and manufacturing capacity. We are in the process of establishing a number of these zones in other parts of the country. These facilitate the concentration of related industries and value chains in one location and provide advantageous regulatory environment. South Africa has made important progress in as far as resolving the energy supply challenges that we faced 2 years ago, which have been the result of underinvestment in generation capacity. With new power stations coming online and a growing renewable energy program, we will be able to ensure security of supply of energy going well into the future. And at the moment, we are also working to revitalize the agricultural and agro-processing value chain and develop what we call the ocean economy, what you in this region call the blue ocean economy. And we're doing this in areas such as shipbuilding, maritime transport, aquaculture, and a number of other related areas. By developing South Africa's manufacturing sector and making it more competitive, we intend to give South African firms a better chance of competing with their international peers. We have begun an ambitious infrastructure investment program going forward, building huge dams and making sure that capital investment happens in our country to underpin the economic growth that we want to see. The government is undertaking massive investments in water, communication, infrastructure, and energy. It is also building a lot of other social infrastructure, like universities. We now have 23 universities. We've just added 2 more to 25. And we now have a number of more colleges that we did not have in the past. And we're expanding all this so as to prepare the young people of our country to play the key and important role in the economy of South Africa. Over a century ago, a great visionary and one of the founders of the African National Congress, which is the ruling party in our country, and Nelson Mandela's party, Pixley Kaisa Kaseme, foresaw even then the regeneration of Africa in terms of what is now taking place across the continent. He possibly looked through the looking glass and saw an Africa that is going to be regenerated, an Africa that is going to grow exponentially. He possibly saw what is unfolding now on his continent, and he declared at the time that a new and unique civilization is soon to be added to the world, and he meant the African civilization. In a speech that has resonated across the years, and indeed a speech that resonated across a number of continents, he said that the brighter day is rising upon Africa. And he continued, already I seem to see her chains dissolved, her desert plains red with harvest. And he said that her Abyssinia and her Zululand, the seats of science and religion, reflecting the glory of the rising sun from the spires of their churches and universities. Her Congo and her Gambia whitened with commerce, her crowded cities sending forth the hum of business, and all her sons employed in advancing the victories of a peace greater and more abiding than the spoils of war. That is what this great son of Africa foresaw in the 1900s. He saw an Africa that is going to grow. It may well have taken time to get to the point which he foresaw, but his looking glass was not lying. It was just deferred. What is now emerging on the African continent, and also especially in my own country, is precisely what Pixlika Isakaseme foresaw. This is the Africa that is rising. It is an Africa that is surging forward, and it is an Africa that is ready for partnerships, an Africa that is ready to join hands with the rest of the world for development. We hope that Singapore will want to be part of this African Renaissance. And we say this advisedly because we want Singapore, the giant, small giant that it is, to start playing a key role, to spread its knowledge, to spread its resources, to spread its energy, and to spread its DNA right across as well, so that all of us can share in the experience that Singapore has been through. And this is what I believe Lee Kuan Yew would also have wanted to see happening. We hope that the people of this great Lee Kuan Yew nation will hear the call of the children of the African continent. We trust that you will find lasting value and fulfillment in being ready partners in this exciting and futuristic enterprise. A brighter day is indeed rising upon Africa, and we sincerely hope that the people of Singapore will walk this journey with us, because it is a journey worth walking. Yourselves as well, in your own history, there are some of your partners who walked this journey with you, who also supported you and helped you to get where you are. And I think in the terms of humanity development, it behoves on you as well to assist those that can best utilize your assistance. And Singapore can therefore be a great partner to Africa, particularly to South Africa, as we move to our next 10 years. It is a 10 years that is pregnant with a great deal of hope, 10 years that's pregnant with a great deal of promise, and it's 10 years of a decade where South Africans are prepared and determined to work very hard to match the type of assistance that we expect that you will give. I thank you.